Hi there, welcome to this craft demonstration from Carrickfergus Museum. Carrickfergus Museum is a big fan of the book Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift actually lived in Carrickfergus for a short time, and some people think that the coastline looking down at Carrickfergus with Cave Hill off in the distance was the inspiration for his book about Lemuel Gulliver. Gulliver was a traveller who discovered some very strange places on his adventures. As well as being an Anglican minister, Jonathan Swift was actually a tutor to an 8-year-old girl called Esther Johnson, who he nicknamed Stella. In this print from the museum's collections, we can see the two of them working very hard. I wonder if that's what you look like when you're working on your schoolwork at home. Well, I don't know if Jonathan Swift ever told Stella the story of Gulliver's travels, or if they ever did any crafts together. But I do know that his story is still as popular today as it was when it was written nearly 300 years ago. Maybe you know the story already, but if you don't, let me tell you a little bit. In the country of Lilliput, Gulliver feels like he is a giant because the people there are so tiny and it takes thousands of them to capture him. Then he visits another place called Brobdingnag, where he is the tiny one and everyone there is huge. And he finds himself on a floating island called Laputa, where the people make some impossibly mad inventions. Can you imagine living on a flying island in the sky? Well, today I'm going to show you a little craft so you can make your own flying island. In this craft, I'll be making a miniature garden, a fairy garden, inspired by the floating island of Laputa. You could make a mini garden in the same way, inspired by your own favourite book. What buildings and plants would that have? Our first step is to decorate a biscuit or sweetie tub that we'll fill with soil later for our mini garden. To make mine look like an island, I'm covering it with paper mache. So I need some scrap paper, lots of PVA glue, and I also have a loo roll to make the buildings. If you're covering your tub with paper mache like I am, stick the tub onto a circle of card and then use tape to stick lots and lots of scrunched up balls of paper all over it until the tub is completely hidden. You can also make any hills or mountains you'd like out of scrunched paper. Okay, it does take some time and patience to get all of those balls of newspaper or scrap paper scrunched up and stuck around your biscuit tub, but whenever you've finished, hopefully it'll look something like this. Now we don't want to paint straight onto this because it's full of little holes where we have scrumpled up the paper. So first we're going to cover it up, and there's two ways that you can do that. For both methods I'll show you, you need to paint plenty of PVA glue onto your scrunched paper. Then, if the paints you'll be using are going to be ready mix or poster paint, you should cover your gluey scrunched paper with some small squares of newspaper until it's completely covered, and you'll need to let it dry for about a day. Cover your whole island in little strips of newspaper to make a nice surface for painting, or if you've got acrylic paints to use later on and you've asked permission, you can take a big sheet of tin foil and you can wrap that over your scrumpled up newspaper like this. As with the paper method, paint on some glue first. You'll see this method is quicker and you can paint on it straight away if you have acrylic paints. Just wrap a large piece of foil over a gluey section and then press it into all the nooks and crannies. Next, it's time to make some buildings. I'm using a toilet roll to make my castle, keep and courtyard. Little containers like matchboxes or yogurt tubs or even stones would also be really nice to paint like buildings. I'm cutting some small slips down into the tube and then I'll just fold down every other one to make the battlement shape. And I'm going to leave my keep circular. If you want to make a square or rectangle shape with the loo roll, it's really easy to just squeeze it into shape by pinching in 4 corners. Now we've made all our pieces, we're ready to paint. And I have some cotton wool here too that I'll stick on for my clouds. To make the outside of my mini garden look like an island, I'm putting on lots of brown paint with some splodges of green and dark brown. If your garden is inspired by a different story, you might want to paint it mostly green to look like grass. With everything painted and dried, it's time for my favourite part, arranging your mini garden. First, fill up your tub with soil. Laputa had a cave that collected rainwater, so I'm using a yogurt pot to hold some water, and then later I'll cover it slightly with some large stones to really make it look like a cave. I went on a lovely walk and gathered up lots of stones, moss, twigs and fir branches that I can use to plant in my garden. Moss in particular looks really great, but you might have to weed out some grass like I did. After I added moss, I decided to add a stony area, and I put bigger stones around the yogurt pot to make the cave. And of course, I needed to add some water to make it just like Laputa. To make forests, you can use little twigs, which will look like bare trees. If you find them difficult to poke through the moss or stones, use the end of a pencil to make a hole for them first. It's nice to have some mini evergreens too, so you could pop in some tiny bits from conifer trees or hedges. Lastly, I'm setting my buildings on a large stone so that I can water my garden without them going soggy. Now that we've planted our miniature garden, our biscuit tub is really looking like an island or like a mountain peeking up from the clouds. But of course Laputa was actually a floating island, so it's time for the final step, which is to try and balance this on a big glass jar. Now I would ask a grown-up to help you with this, and I also would take both of these pieces to the place that your miniature garden is going to live in your house, so you don't have to try and move it afterwards. So just be careful. Try and find the centre of gravity. And it is actually quite sturdy as long as it doesn't get a big knock. Now yours doesn't have to float. Maybe you're not going to make Laputa at all. Maybe you're going to make the grounds of Hogwarts or the Shire or a farm or something else inspired by your favourite book. We really hope you enjoy trying out this craft.